Can you believe that my ex-wife went to a high school reunion and rekindled her romance with her high school sweetheart? I hired a private investigator, and the photos and videos he took still make my hair stand on end. It started with a photo, a single, seemingly innocent snapshot posted online. Her, beaming in a group of old classmates, and him, her high school sweetheart, with his arm casually draped over her shoulders. At first, I didn't think much of it. The caption was vague, reunion vibes, catching up on old times. It was the kind of thing people post after an alumni get-together, and I'd never been the jealous type. I didn't even notice the picture until a few days later when my buddy Chris sent me a text. "Hey man, saw the wife's post. You good with that?" Thought that was her ex. Ex? I thought Chris was messing with me. But when I zoomed in on the photo, something about the way they stood together felt off. The relaxed familiarity. The way their smiles matched as though they were sharing an inside joke meant for no one else. I shrugged it off, convincing myself I was overthinking. But then came the change. Small, almost imperceptible at first. Late-night texts she'd brush off as work stuff. A new gym routine she suddenly couldn't miss, and a laugh I hadn't heard in years when she'd scroll through her phone. She'd always been social, so I didn't think much of it until the night I overheard her on a phone call. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, laced with excitement. "No, you didn't," she said, giggling in that way she used to when we were first dating. "Stop it, you're terrible." When she noticed me standing in the hallway, her expression changed. "Oh, it's just work," she said quickly, hanging up. Her eyes darted to her phone, then back to me. "Everything okay?" That was the moment I knew. Something wasn't right. I didn't confront her, though. Not yet. Instead, I started paying attention, watching, listening, noticing the things I'd ignored before. I felt like I was living someone else's life, a stranger in my own home. I hated how paranoid I felt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I'd trusted for years was keeping something from me. One night, while she was asleep, I finally gave in to the temptation to check her phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I opened her messages. And there it was, a thread with a contact saved as Kelly, work. But the messages weren't about work. They were about him. "Can't wait to see you again. It was just like old times. You still know how to make me laugh like nobody else. Meet me at the usual spot. Same time." It was all there, in black and white. The reunion wasn't just a chance to catch up with old friends. It was a chance to rekindle something I thought had been buried in the past. I sat there in the dark, gripping her phone like it might burn me. I wasn't just angry. I was shattered. But instead of waking her up and confronting her right then, I made a decision. I'd gather every last piece of evidence. And when the moment was right, I'd make sure she couldn't deny a thing. I had a plan. And it would be her birthday surprise. Once I made up my mind, something inside me shifted. The heartbreak was still there, clawing at my chest every time I looked at her. But it wasn't just pain anymore. It was determination. I didn't want just an apology or some half-hearted excuse. No, I wanted the truth. And I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek before heading out for a quick gym session. It took everything in me not to flinch. Instead, I smiled and told her I'd make dinner that night. After she left, I sat down at my laptop and started digging. I knew her routines, her favorite spots, the places she'd go to clear her head. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. Her gym visits? Not on the gym app schedule. Her lunches with coworkers? There was no charge on her usual card at any restaurant. Everything started aligning too perfectly. But I needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. The first big break came from her social media. She was careful not to post anything incriminating, but he wasn't as discreet. Buried in his profile was a picture from the reunion, one I hadn't seen before. It was a candid shot, her leaning in close, laughing as he whispered something in her ear. The caption read, "Sometimes, old flames never die." Old flames. My jaw clenched as I saved the photo. It wasn't the kind of thing she could explain away, but I still needed more. That's when I decided to take it a step further. The next week, I told her I had a big project coming up at work and might be late most nights. She barely batted an eye. If anything, she seemed relieved. That stung more than I'd expected, but it gave me the space I needed. Using a burner email, I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, like something out of a soap opera, but I wasn't about to let her lies slide under the radar. The guy I hired, Dave, was an older man who spoke in clipped sentences and carried a notebook like it was still the 90s. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "What's the address? Got a name?" I handed over the details, feeling a mix of shame and adrenaline. "Just don't follow her too closely," I added. "I don't want her to know." Dave gave me a curt nod. "You want pictures?" I hesitated. "Pictures, videos, whatever you find." For the next 2 weeks, my phone buzzed with updates. Every time it did, my stomach twisted. At first, there were just photos of her leaving the house, heading to nondescript coffee shops or parking lots. But then came the real stuff, the photos of her and him together. One showed them at a small, tucked-away restaurant. They were sitting close, his hand resting on hers. Another was taken from a distance as they walked through a park. They weren't holding hands, but the way they moved, casual, comfortable, like a couple, said it all. The final blow came when Dave sent me a video. It was grainy, taken from across a hotel lobby. There she was, standing by the reception desk, laughing as he handed her a room key. My heart sank as I watched her take it, a smile on her face that used to be meant for me. I stared at my laptop that night, all the evidence laid out in front of me. I should have felt devastated, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the proof I needed. Her birthday was in 3 weeks. I'd planned a big celebration with her family and friends, a tradition we'd kept every year since we got married. This year, though, I decided to give her something special, something unforgettable. I spent the next few days preparing. I printed everything, every photo, every screenshot, every timestamp. I even labeled them, just in case she thought of playing dumb. Then I went to the lawyer's office and finalized the divorce papers. Everything was set. Now, all I had to do was wait. The waiting was the hardest part. Each day felt like walking on a tightrope over a pit of anger and heartbreak, teetering between confronting her and holding out for her birthday. But I knew patience was key. I needed everything perfectly aligned for the moment I revealed what I knew. Then Dave called. His voice was unusually cautious. "Got something you might want to see," he said. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. He sighed. "Let's just say, it's a little more explicit than what we've found so far." Explicit. That single word sent a chill through me. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop that afternoon. When I arrived, Dave slid a manila envelope across the table, his expression uncharacteristically grim. "You sure you want to see this?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Just give it to me." Inside were a handful of photos. At first, they were similar to the ones he'd sent before. Her and him sitting close at a restaurant, walking side by side in a park. But then I reached the last set of pictures, and my blood ran cold. The images showed her in a hot tub, stripped bare under the dim glow of string lights. Her back was arched, hair dripping wet, and she was kneeling in front of him, her mouth open, tongue out, a twisted grin on her face. His head was thrown back, clearly enjoying himself. It was disgusting. My hand shook as I flipped through the photos, each one worse than the last. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the sheer disrespect, the casual way she had flaunted her infidelity, as though I didn't even exist. Dave spoke up, his voice hesitant. "I can stop here if you want. There's more, but—" "No," I interrupted, my voice low and steady. "I want everything." He handed me a flash drive. Videos. A few more images. "You might want to watch them alone." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My mind was a storm of emotions. Anger, humiliation, disgust. But most of all, resolve. She had gone too far, and there was no coming back from this. That night, after she went to bed, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The videos were short but explicit, leaving no room for doubt. There she was, smiling and laughing as they shared private moments in that hot tub. One video even showed her pulling him close, whispering something in his ear before leaning back and giving him that same grin. The one I used to think was meant just for me. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I methodically saved every file and added it to the collection. These weren't just pieces of evidence anymore. They were my arsenal. In the days that followed, I became eerily calm. She noticed it too. "You've been so quiet lately," she said one morning, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Everything okay?" I gave her a small smile, masking the fury boiling just beneath the surface. "Just busy with work," I lied. "Big project coming up?" She nodded, sipping her coffee. "Well, don't work too hard. You've got to save some energy for my birthday party." "Oh, I've got something special planned," I said, and for the first time in weeks, it wasn't a lie. The invitations were sent, the caterer booked, and the decorations ordered. On the surface, it looked like any other birthday celebration, a night of laughter and love with her closest friends and family. But I knew better. This wasn't just a party. It was the stage for the grand finale, the moment where all the lies and secrets would come crashing down. I had everything prepared. The printed photos, the videos queued up on a USB, and the divorce papers sitting in a crisp envelope. And for the piece de resistance, I had a slideshow ready to play during this special moment of the evening. She wouldn't see it coming. The morning of her birthday arrived like the eye of a hurricane, eerily calm, with a quiet tension buzzing under the surface. She woke up smiling, leaning over to kiss me on the cheek. I played my role perfectly, smiling back and murmuring a cheerful, "Happy birthday, babe." As she got ready for her day, humming to herself, I finished the final touches. The photos were printed, the USB with the videos was carefully placed in my jacket pocket, and the divorce papers were sealed in a sleek envelope with her name written in bold. I double-checked the slideshow on my laptop, ensuring every incriminating piece of evidence was in perfect order. She had no idea what was coming. That afternoon, the house buzzed with activity. Caterers set up in the backyard, her friends and family trickled in, and laughter filled the air. I played the gracious host, shaking hands, sharing smiles, and pouring drinks like nothing was wrong. I even helped her hang a banner that read, "Happy birthday, Sarah." She looked radiant, laughing with her friends and thanking everyone for coming. For a moment, I felt a pang of the love I used to have for her, a love that had been crushed under the weight of her betrayal. But I pushed the thought aside. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about the truth. As the evening rolled on, the backyard transformed into a lively celebration. Lights twinkled in the trees, music played softly, and the scent of catered barbecue filled the air. I stayed close to her, playing the doting husband, making sure she had everything she needed. Then, it was time for the toast. I tapped a glass with a fork, drawing everyone's attention. The chatter died down as the guests turned to face me. Sarah stood beside me, her face glowing with anticipation, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Sarah's special day," I began, my voice steady and warm. "She's an incredible woman, and it's been an honor to spend these years by her side." Her smile widened as she squeezed my hand. For a split second, I almost faltered. But then I remembered the photos, the videos, the lies. My resolve hardened. "And tonight," I continued, "I have a surprise for her. Something I've been working on for weeks." Her eyes lit up, and the crowd murmured with curiosity. I reached for my laptop, which I'd set up on a small table near the front. "I've prepared a little slideshow," I said, glancing at her. "A walk down memory lane." The first few slides were harmless enough. Pictures from vacations, family gatherings, and holidays. The crowd cooed and chuckled as the slideshow played, reminiscing about the good times. Sarah looked over at me, her smile soft and grateful. But then the tone shifted. The next photo showed her at the reunion, standing too close to him. The one after that captured them at the park, his hand on hers. A murmur rippled through the crowd, confused but not yet fully grasping what they were seeing. Then came the hot tub photo. Gasps echoed across the backyard. Someone dropped a glass. Sarah's face drained of color as she stared at the screen, frozen in place. The slideshow continued, each photo more damning than the last. By the time the video clip of her in the hotel lobby appeared, the crowd had fallen completely silent. I turned to her, my voice calm but cutting. "Happy birthday, Sarah." She stumbled backward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I can explain," she stammered, but I held up a hand to stop her. "There's no need to explain," I said, pulling the envelope from my pocket. "This is your real gift." I handed her the divorce papers, watching as her trembling hands took them. The crowd erupted into hushed whispers, her parents looking on in shock, her friends exchanging wide-eyed glances. One of her co-workers awkwardly excused himself, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. "This isn't just between us anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the vows we made, the life we built, and everyone who trusted you." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, please." "No," I interrupted. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." I turned to the guests. "Thank you all for coming. I'll let Sarah explain the rest. For me, this party is over." With that, I grabbed my jacket, nodded to a few stunned friends, and walked out the front door. As I stepped into the night, the muffled sound of her sobs and the shocked murmurs of the crowd faded behind me. I didn't feel anger or sadness, just a strange, weightless sense of freedom. For the first time in months, I was finally in control. The walk to my car felt surreal. My hands were steady, my heartbeat calm, as though I had finally dropped a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the heat and tension I had left behind in the backyard. I climbed into the car, taking a deep breath. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it, "Sarah." I let it ring. The buzzing stopped, only to start again a moment later. Call after call, her name lit up the screen, but I didn't answer. Instead, I drove. No destination in mind, just a need to put distance between myself and the wreckage I'd left behind. I let the hum of the tires on the road drown out the noise in my head. By the time I stopped, I found myself parked by a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, nearly empty. A neon sign flickered in the window, open 24 hours. I walked in, the bell above the door jingling softly, and slid into a booth near the back. A waitress approached, her expression kind but tired. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. "And a slice of pie, if you've got any." As she walked away, I finally let myself think about what had just happened. The look on Sarah's face when the slideshow started, the gasps from the crowd, the way her hands shook as she held the divorce papers, it all replayed in my mind like a scene from a movie. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I wasn't sorry either. While I sat there, sipping coffee and staring out the window, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sarah. It was her best friend, Rachel. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What?" I said, my tone flat. "Jack, what the hell was that?" she snapped. "You humiliated her in front of everyone." I let out a bitter laugh. Humiliated her? I think she managed that on her own. "Come on," Rachel said, her voice softer now. "You could have handled this privately. Why drag everyone else into it?" "Because she didn't just cheat on me, Rachel," I said, my voice tightening. "She lied to everyone. Her parents, her friends, you. Don't pretend you didn't know." There was a pause on the other end, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "Not for sure. I suspected, but I didn't think she'd actually go through with it." "Well, now you know," I said, leaning back in the booth. "And so does everyone else." The conversation ended there, and I turned my phone off. I didn't want to hear any more excuses, any more attempts to defend her. I didn't care what anyone thought about how I'd handled it. For once, I had done something for myself on my terms. The waitress brought my pie, and I ate in silence, savoring the simple act of taking a moment for myself. When I finished, I left a generous tip, paid the bill, and walked back to my car. When I finally returned home, it was well past midnight. The house was dark, the silence heavy. I half expected to find Sarah waiting for me, but the place was empty. Her things were still there, her scent lingering in the air, but she was gone. I didn't feel relief or regret, just a strange, hollow ache. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, letting the weight of the night settle over me. This was the end of one chapter. But what came next? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. The days after the party were a blur. The phone calls started early the next morning. First Sarah, then her parents, and eventually mutual friends. I ignored every one of them. My voicemail overflowed with messages ranging from tearful apologies to furious accusations. The silence in my house, however, was deafening. For the first time in years, the place felt cavernous, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a reminder of what had been lost, or maybe what had finally been purged. Sarah's calls were relentless. The messages began with desperate apologies. "Jack, please. I know I messed up. I was stupid, but I love you. Please call me." Then came the anger. "You had no right to do that to me. I made a mistake. But you destroyed my reputation. What's wrong with you?" I deleted them without hesitation. I wasn't going to engage. She'd made her bed, and I wasn't about to lie in it with her. 2 days after the party, I received a call from Dave, the private investigator. He sounded amused. "Looks like you stirred the pot," he said. "What do you mean?" "Her guy, her high school sweetheart? He's losing his mind. Apparently, his wife found out too." I felt a bitter satisfaction settle in my chest. "Good." Dave chuckled. "Thought you'd like to know. Also, I'm sending over the final invoice." I paid him immediately. The money was worth every penny. If nothing else, I had ensured that her affair wouldn't just quietly fade into the background. There were consequences now, real ones. That night, I sat down to go through the divorce paperwork one last time. It was straightforward. Thanks to our prenup, there was little she could fight for. I'd kept the house, the car, and most of my savings. She'd leave with what she came into the marriage with, which wasn't much. As I reviewed the documents, I couldn't help but think about how things had started between us. We were so young, so full of hope. I'd been her rock, her safe place. I'd given her everything I had, and for a long time, I thought that was enough. But somewhere along the way, something broke. Or maybe it was never whole to begin with. By the weekend, I finally left the house. Not because I had plans, but because I couldn't bear another day staring at the same four walls. I drove aimlessly for hours, ending up at a park I used to visit as a kid. It was quiet, the kind of place where people went to escape. I sat on a bench, watching the ducks glide across the pond. For the first time since the party, I let myself feel the weight of everything. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness, they all came crashing down at once. I buried my face in my hands, letting out a deep, shuddering breath. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Sarah. "I'm moving out tomorrow. I'll leave my key on the counter. I'm sorry, Jack, for everything." I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I woke to the sound of movement downstairs. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Sarah was gone. Her key sat neatly on the counter next to a note that simply said, "I'm sorry." Her side of the closet was empty. Her toothbrush was missing from the bathroom. The house felt even quieter than before, if that was possible. But instead of sadness, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. Really, truly over. The silence in the house after Sarah moved out was deafening. but in some strange way, it felt like a clean slate. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. There was no tension in the air, no lies waiting to surface, just quiet. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. Every corner of the house reminded me of her. The couch we'd picked out together, the photos still hanging on the walls, the empty spot on the nightstand where her books used to be. I thought about boxing it all up, erasing every trace of her, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the need to process things at my own pace. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for projects I usually avoided. It wasn't about the work itself. It was about keeping my mind busy. Every moment I spent in that empty house felt like a reminder of how much I'd lost and how much I'd endured. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it dulled. The anger wasn't as sharp. Instead of replaying the slideshow in my head, I started thinking about what came next. One Saturday, I decided to tackle the house. I started with the bedroom, stripping the sheets and replacing them with a new set I'd picked up the week before. I packed up Sarah's remaining things, an old sweater she'd left behind, a few books, a photo album, and left them by the door. If she wanted them, she could come get them. If not, they'd go to Goodwill. Next, I moved to the walls. The wedding photos, the vacation pictures, the framed snapshots of us smiling at birthdays and holidays, they all came down. I replaced them with prints of landscapes and abstract art, things that felt neutral, detached. It was cathartic in a way. Each small change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By the end of the day, the house didn't feel so suffocating anymore. It wasn't completely mine yet, but it was getting there. I ordered takeout, poured a glass of whiskey, and sat on the couch, letting myself enjoy the stillness. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. A few days later, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. Chris, the same buddy who'd first tipped me off about the reunion photo. He gave me a knowing look as we stood by the produce aisle. "So, how's it going?" he asked, not quite meeting my eyes. I shrugged. "Better than I expected, honestly." "Yeah, I heard about the party." He winced. "Legendary, by the way. People are still talking about it." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't felt in a long time. "Well, I wasn't going for legendary, but I'll take it." Chris smirked, then hesitated. "Listen, if you ever need to get out, grab a drink or something, just let me know. You've been through hell, man." I nodded, appreciating the offer. "I might take you up on that." That night, as I sat on the couch, I thought about Chris's words. "You've been through hell." He was right, of course. But for the first time, it felt like I was on the other side of it. The scars were still there, raw and tender, but they weren't consuming me anymore. Slowly but surely, I was piecing myself back together. The months that followed were a strange mix of endings and beginnings. Each day felt like an exercise in learning who I was outside of us. It wasn't easy, but I kept moving forward. Little by little, I reclaimed my life, rebuilding it in ways that felt wholly my own. One evening, Chris followed through on his promise. He dragged me out to a small bar downtown, a place we used to hit in our younger days. It was the kind of spot where no one asked questions, and the jukebox played the same 5 songs on repeat. As we sat at the bar, nursing beers and swapping stories, I felt a flicker of normalcy, something I hadn't felt in months. "So," Chris said, leaning back on his stool, "what's next for you?" I took a sip of my beer, letting the question settle. "I don't know," I admitted, "just taking it one day at a time." "Good," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "That's all you can do." Over the weeks that followed, I found myself saying yes to things I'd avoided for years. I joined a hiking group, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I started cooking for myself, real meals, not just takeout and frozen dinners. And I even signed up for a weekend woodworking class, a hobby I'd been interested in since college but had never pursued. Each new experience felt like a small victory, a reminder that life could be bigger than the pain I'd carried. One afternoon, while I was out hiking with the group, I met someone. Her name was Rachel. Not that Rachel, thankfully, but a kind, down-to-earth woman with an easy smile. We struck up a conversation on the trail, and before I knew it, we were walking side by side, talking about everything from travel to movies to the best pizza in town. There was no spark of instant romance, no grand revelation, just a quiet connection, the kind that felt like a seed being planted. At the end of the hike, she handed me her number with a shy smile. "Call me sometime," she said. I hesitated for a moment, then smiled back. "Yeah, I'd like that." It wasn't until later that night, as I sat on the couch holding her number, that I realized something. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Sarah. I wasn't replaying the betrayal or the fallout. I wasn't imagining what I could have done differently. I was just here, in the moment, and it felt good. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. Sarah didn't fight me on it, though she sent one last email before signing the papers. "I know I hurt you, Jack, more than I can ever make up for. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find happiness. You deserve it." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. As the months turned into a year, the pain of what happened began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength. The scars were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I wasn't the man who'd been betrayed. I was just Jack, someone who'd been through hell and come out the other side stronger. Rachel and I went on a few dates. Things were slow, tentative, but good. Whether it turned into something serious didn't matter. What mattered was that I was open to the possibility again. On the anniversary of the party, the night I'd exposed Sarah for who she really was, I sat on the porch of my house, a glass of whiskey in hand. The stars were out, the air crisp and cool. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year, everything I'd lost and gained. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine now, and that was enough.